Taoiseach, could I raise with you the question of the recent announcement by Bord na Móna that they are to accelerate the reduction of peat harvesting? This wipes out a traditional industry with all its financial reward, its rich history and its tradition. The founders of Bord na Móna were people with outstanding vision and ambition. They took creative, bold and courageous decisions. They dedicated themselves to achieve policy objectives by using natural resources to create employment, to build communities and financially sustain rural areas. Harvesting the bog to save turf or manufacture briquettes has come to a shuddering halt. This is due to environmental consequences and the necessity to comply with European regulations regarding the use of fossil fuels. As a representative of Tipperary, I have seen at first hand the devastation caused by the closure of Littleton Briquette Factory. This resulted in the loss of 125 jobs, plus the loss to hundreds of other service providers. This workforce was made up generally of general workers, electrical and mechanical engineers, fitters, administrators and management. It has impacted on Littleton, on Killinall, on Ballingarry, on Templetoohy, on Thurles and all of the surrounding areas. The closure of Littleton plant was sudden, it was swift and it was greeted with widespread dismay. The decision by Bord na Móna was notable for its lack of advance notice and its lack of consideration for the employees and their dependent families. The redundancy package on offer was meagre and did not reflect the years of dedicated, committed and loyal service by the workers. We had to fight long and hard to secure an enhanced package. After a protracted struggle, we got an agreement on terms which I presume will now become the blueprint for redundancy negotiations on behalf of the workers affected by the Midland closures. What is evident and very clear is the absence of a strategy by Bord na Móna to provide alternative opportunities. There is no effort to maintain the rural infrastructure and support the communities that are so devastated by the resulting job losses. The Bord na Móna announcement on the closure is long on aspiration and very short on detail. It is a unique natural resource, the bog. The question now and the challenge is how to utilise and maximise the potential for the future. Like the original inspirational leaders and founders of Bord na Móna, we have to revisit the drawing board. We have to be imaginative and creative to harness the bog for alternative uses. We have to create business opportunities. The question arises as to what the future will hold. If the 500 alternative jobs that Bord na Móna say they can deliver on, if they are ever to be created or to materialise, they need the full resources and support of the state. Within the National Brain Trust, there is an abundance of relevant experience that could be made available through the IDA, Teagasc, Bord Bia and Bord Fáilte. These peatlands are national assets and the best intelligence should be deployed as a matter of urgency to address their development in a concentrated and joined-up manner.
Thank you, Deputy.
Whatever the solution, in conclusion, Taoiseach, whatever the solution, the future requires heavy investment. And I'm asking that the Ireland Strategic Investment Funds, which has billions of euro at its disposal, would be mandated to assist Bord na Móna in developing a path to the future.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
First of all, I just want to thank Deputy Lowry for raising the important issue of the future of Bord na Móna and its impact on the economy and on jobs in the Midlands in particular. And he's of course correct to say that when Bord na Móna was established, it was established as part of that original vision of the semi-states, the government stepping in to set up state-owned enterprise where the private sector dare not go. And Bord na Móna was originally established with the mandate to develop the Midlands region using the natural resources there, peat in particular, to harvest it for fuel, to produce electricity and to create jobs and economic development in the Midland region, which it has done very successfully for decades. Of course, things have changed since then, and we now know about climate change, and we know that peat is a particularly dirty fuel in that regard. Even cutting turf, even harvesting peat and turf releases CO2. And then burning it to produce fuel, burning it for electricity does the same. So things need to change. Bord na Móna needs to transform from being a semi-state company based on peat that creates CO2 emissions to a green company that's involved primarily in producing renewable energy, in waste recovery and recycling, and also in new industries like retrofit of public buildings and houses. And that's the plan that the company has, and it's a plan that the government wants to be part of. But as is always the case with climate change, we need a just transition, and we need to bear in mind the impact that these changes are going to have on people who used to work in Bordnamona and on the communities and the local economies supported by the revenue that that company creates. So it is important that redundancy should be voluntary. It's important that there be good redundancy packages put in place and early retirement offers made. And also it's really important that staff are given the opportunity to train up for new jobs in the company, whether it's jobs working in the renewable energy sector, whether it's working in waste recovery and recycling, or whether it's working in retrofit. And that's the vision we have for Bordnamona, is to bring about that just transition, turning it from a company based on peat, causing climate change, to one that's all about renewable energy, one that's all about retrofit, one that's all about waste recovery, a green semi-state. And I think there are enormous opportunities for the Midlands region and for the staff and future staff if we embrace that. And I agree that the state needs to be involved in it, and potentially funds like ISIF and others could be involved in helping to make that transition as possible as well.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Lowry.
Yes, Taoiseach, I think it's hugely important that the state does become involved, because it's quite obvious to anybody who knows anything about it that Bordnamona's financial resources are already stretched. The cost of the redundancy package that will have to be available to the workers from the Midlands and from Tipperary has to be met from their fund, and therefore there's no investment funds left. So they do need the support of the Strategic Investment Fund made available to them, and to work in conjunction with them. One other issue, Taoiseach, I'd ask you to raise with Bordnamona. In Tipperary there's 10,000 acres of bog stretching from Littleton up as far as County Laois. Already we have seen where we have had trespassing on these lands, and people have taken ownership of the lands. It's a huge concern for local residents from local areas because of vandalism and violence that goes with it. And the board of Bordnamona should be asked to protect this, what is a national asset. We're talking here about 10,000 acres of land in our area. We're also talking about huge industrial buildings that have a value, but if they're not secured properly, we lose that value.
Thank you, Deputy Lowry. Taoiseach, to conclude on this matter.
I'm glad that we're in the presence of Minister Bruton here today, so I don't need to commit to making him aware of what you just mentioned. I think it is essential that Bordnamona should protect what are public assets, its buildings and its bogs. And I wouldn't like to see a situation like occurred with CIE down the years, when large amounts of land that was owned by CIE and Irish Rail was encroached upon by people who then acquired squatters' rights and ownership to it. So it is important that those public assets are protected and defended by the company in the interests of the wider public and particularly people living in the Midlands. The Deputy mentioned ISIF as a possible fund that could help to fund Bordnamona's transition. And that is an option. There are also other funds as well. Bear in mind there's the €1 billion Rural Development Fund, the Regional Enterprise Fund, and also a €500 million fund for climate action. And we should be able to make the first set of announcements of funding from those funds before the end of the year. And I think there's potential there as well for the company.
Thank you, Taoiseach.